Today on the PitchBook Podcast, we have relief pitcher Tanner Olson pitching the MVP Machine by Ben Lindbergh and Travis Sawchik. Batter up!
Tanner, how are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good. We're excited to have you on. A few years ago on LinkedIn, we've known each other for I don't know how many years. It's maybe been 10 years. It feels
good
like
decade.
Yeah, it's been a good decade. We've got a good decade under our belt. Tanner is always 21 in my mind. He's just a young guy, married with kids, just rocking it. But you moved to Texas, Seattle, and then one out of the blue, I saw this post on LinkedIn. You're like, I just got my dream job. I'm working for the Phillies. I'm like, going from tech to baseball. I'm like, what is it? What is this? That was a huge jump. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that jump going to the Phillies for a bit and what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess even to go a little bit before then. So I grew up for the most part in St. Louis, Missouri. And if you grew up in the Midwest, especially St. Louis, there's not a lot going on, right? So there's Anheuser-Busch. So for people who like to drink and do that, like that's their thing. But if you don't, unfortunately, there's not a lot going on besides like the Cardinals and the local baseball team and sports. So sports is a big deal in St. Louis. Baseball specifically because the Cardinals are there. So every kid kind of grows up dreaming and wishing to be a Cardinals baseball player, right? So I grew up playing baseball. It's always been a dream of mine. And it was a dream of mine as a little kid to like get the chance to work in professional baseball at some point. So to speed up the story a little bit, I was a senior in high school after my family moved to Utah. I finished out there, and then I went to school and, trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. I always had in the back of my mind that like, hey, I want to work in baseball one day. So I didn't know what I wanted to be. I thought I wanted to do something in finance. So I studied economics because I'm like, hey, in my mind, this could leave the door open to eventually get to work in baseball one day. Because I know a lot of I think baseball GMs and statisticians within baseball study economics. I'm like, you know what, like I'll go for it. So studied economics, had a few opportunities to interview with baseball teams actually when I was leaving school at the time. But nothing was a great fit. I was just finishing, I had a baby, I was married, and the starting salaries, I would say, for baseball, especially people coming from undergrad, are very minuscule. So like the reality is like I couldn't make it happen. Even though my heart was in it, I dreamed it. That timing wasn't right. So kind of thinking about again, like what I want to do when I grow up. I did an internship in finance. That didn't pan out. I didn't love it. Couldn't imagine doing that for my career. I interviewed at this company called Amazon. I didn't know anything about tech at the time, and I got the job. And it was a great opportunity. I think a first job, so I took it. Yeah. So it was as an analyst too, so it was good. I got to, I think, increase my data skills, learn more like hands-on data analysis in that space. But in the back of my mind, the chance to work in baseball like never fleeted, right? I was still always considering that as a potential option, like a dream of mine. So I would every year when baseball jobs after the season would come out, I would apply to like one or two just for like my self gratification in case like it possibly could come to pass one day, right? So fast forward doing this for 5-6 years now, there was a job that got flagged on LinkedIn for a product manager role, which is not necessarily something that baseball teams have invested in the past for the Philadelphia Phillies. I applied for the role, and it was in their research and development division. So research and development division in baseball is kind of like the Moneyball team that we call it within the Phillies organization. So they're the team that does all like the internal software, builds all the models for player development, player evaluation, in-game strategy. So the role, kind of fast forwarding a little bit further, once I started interviewing for it, was a product manager in space to help build out the vision and like a product roadmap, because they wanted to invest more so in their internal tech team. So they needed someone to come in and give them a little bit of light on how they could best use their investments on engineers and hardware. So I ultimately applied, interviewed, and to my surprise as well, I got the role. It was one of those things where, like, at that point, I couldn't pass up. Like I said, it was my dream as a kid. I think, like, on paper, it was probably a little bit of a risky move. I was kind of going back in a lot of ways, career growth wise, definitely compensation wise, and a lot of different factors. But, you know, at the end of the day, I knew if I didn't take it, I would kick myself. And I had a long conversation with my wife too. I said, like, how can I tell my kids to chase their dreams? You know, if I was given the opportunity, I actually never took it myself. So for me, it was like a dream come true, great opportunity. And that's how I landed with the Phillies last year for the season.
Now, so not a New York Yankees budget, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, you couldn't get a 0.25% of Bryce Young's contract or something.
Harper.
Bryce Harper. Sorry, Bryce Harper.
Yeah, that would have worked out really nice.
Yeah, that would have been not bad.
Actually, they have one of the highest salary caps. Salary caps these days. So they're spending a lot of money on their team. So
was there any? Was there any fringe benefits? I mean, did you get some tickets? Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get some of the perks. You get 4 tickets to any home game or away game, which is a very fun perk. It's fun to go to the games. And there's actually a box that's like designated for the front office staff.
Oh, cool.
Unless like some celebrity or somebody comes in, then they let them use that box. So that was fun. And then like the best perk of all time for me was the opportunity to go to spring training, get it back, you know, stage pass to everything going on.
Cool.
You're at the training facilities, you're around the players, you're seeing the technology that they're using up close and personal. And that was just so fun. You're watching games, you know, right behind home plate with the general manager and the president of baseball, who's Dave Dombrowski, who's like a pretty legendary general manager. You're just talking to him, having casual conversations about, you know, your family and your hobbies and things like that while you're watching.
And then some young buck like that you recommended through your computer system strikes out and then just give you a look like, what was that? What was that, Tanner?
I know.
Computer guy.
The future of some of these players are in our hands. So
it's crazy.
It's a little bit nerve-wracking that way. Yeah. The baseball players in front offices, you know, they try to be synergistic, but there's some headbutting as well, just old school, new school mentality. So
cool. Well, Tanner obviously is a smart guy. He brought, let me back up. For those who are new to the podcast, we never know when a relief pitcher's coming, nor does when Zach and I pitch to each other. We never know what book is going to come up. So Tanner, knowing that we have a baseball-themed book podcast, picked a baseball book, kind of, I guess. I don't know what this book is about. It's called The MVP Machine. How did you find this book, Tanner?
Yeah, so when I got my first interview with the Phillies, I frantically started looking online at the baseball books I needed to read to prepare for my interview. Okay. So this was one that just came up on all the searches, was highly recommended, at least from Google. So I got the book, and then as I started interviewing, it was interesting. The interviewers actually were talking about this book as well. So I was like, you know, that just confirmed that this was a good pickup on my part for doing homework. So
is it similar to like a Moneyball? Is it, in that vein? Tell us about the book.
Yeah. So it's in that vein. I guess a quick history lesson, kind of where baseball is at, is it's progressing quite a bit with the evolution of data. Mm-hmm. So Moneyball comes out, pretty revolutionary at the time. It's using historical game data to try to find competitive advantages of players and these insights of things that have historically not necessarily been heavily weighted. So, we're looking at batting averages, but batting averages aren't necessarily how we should be evaluating players. Maybe on base percentage is a better metric, right? Mm-hmm. So this goes out for a while, right? They're using this data. I think The A's are the first team to really kind of run with this. They see a lot of success. Are you an A's fan?
Yeah.
Huish?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
That's Zach's.
Yeah.
Oh
That's-
man, you're a Vegas A's fan.
But only 9 World Series. I know the Cards have 11.
Yeah, you guys are close. Yeah. So so what happens is, right, and with anything, your competitive advantage starts to weaken pretty fast as everybody gets on board.
Yes.
And that's what kind of happened. So uh, baseball actually evolved systems in the data that they were collecting. So there was like TrackMan StatCast that came out that was starting to track like ball movement data within a game. So the spin
Yeah.
of a pitch, the movements, the exit velocity off the bat, the launch angles, all these different things. So that opens up a whole new can of worms of data that you can start going through to try to understand like what intrinsically makes a player good. Because I think that's the big question, right? And some of the things that Moneyball was pitching at the time, it had a lot of blind spots because there's a lot of factors looking at this data that you can't control for. So like, someone might have high batting average or high in base, but you can't necessarily control, or it's hard to, for the stadiums that they're playing in.
Right.
Or the pitchers that they're facing. And there's all these different variables that are hard to control for. But with the evolution of the data that they're gathering, StatCast comes out. Now you can intrinsically kind of pinpoint more so a player's skill and kind of wean out some of the things that might be luck or bias. So, for instance, like just to give you guys a quick insight, like for hitters now, there's like three things that people really look at. It's bat speed, which is like the highest thing that's weighted. And when you're evaluating a hitter, there's bat to ball, so like how good a player is at making contact, and then there's pitch decision or swing decision, so like how good they are swinging at the right pitches. So with this evolution of like this TrackMan data, you can understand and gain these insights in these areas to say, hey, like what the batter can actually control, how good are they at what they're doing. And same thing for pitching. Pitching is actually easier than hitting in a lot of ways. You can see how fast they're pitching. You can see how the movement of their baseballs are. You can see the output of what the hitter does based off of what's thrown at them, and then you can start to formulate some ideas of what actually at the core of it makes a pitcher good. So to kind of answer your question about MVP machine, it goes through this evolution of how the game's changing, and it really starts kind of drilling in the fact that in this day and age, baseball players can be built rather than just having these like intrinsic abilities and being lucky. And
Really?
it goes through a lot of examples of that. So it goes through examples of Trevor Bauer, who I know is that controversial figure now in baseball. He's been banned. That's a story for
Different
another
story.
day.
But him as a baseball player.
He was a baseball player and he's a pitcher.
Mhm.
And it goes through the evolution of kind of the technology that he uses to become the pitcher that he ultimately becomes. He wins a Cy Young, and he, self-proclaims himself as a non-athlete. And you look at him, not a very intimidating guy, but the basis of it is with great data and the right technology, and the consistency of using this data to become better. Like the output is, you can create an MVP all-star caliber player by these insights now. And it's a pretty compelling case. So like there's Trevor Bauer, there's Mookie Betts, who if you're a baseball fan is one of the best baseball players. It talks about his evolution as well and the data that they're using, the tools that they're using to perfect his swing and become a power hitter at like 5'9", 190 pounds is pretty remarkable. But it bases, the evolution of the data that they now have to kind of tune what makes a baseball player good, to practice those skills with the right, technology and training can ultimately impact your performance, which makes you amazing player. So it goes through that process all the way to the current day, where we're even, surpassing TrackMan data now. Now the new data that the game has is called Hawkeye data, which is like biomechanic data. So I don't know if you've ever seen like those sports figures or skeletons that are like the baseball or stuff like that.
They're like a wireframe of the outline of
Yeah, so now they have that data that they're gathering in game. So the next evolution, which is going to kind of, just keep the flywheel going, is they have all this biomechanic data and this access now that they're using to leverage to build better baseball players and to get this insight of what mechanics, what structural skeleton, anatomy of a player makes a player more optimal than maybe others, and all this different information that they're just trying to shift through in order to be able to gain insights of baseball. So the book kind of goes through an evolution, and it talks about where the game's at, where the game's going, with the thesis being that baseball players can be built by good data. So
what you? Oh, let me ask a question real quick, Zach. Tanner, you kind of answered my question before I had a chance to ask it. That's how good you are. But what I was going to ask, like, you hear about Moneyball, and that was more the front office saying, here's what we know. We're going to find less expensive players that are still good at certain things. Now this is more the players figuring out what exercises to do, how to get their bat speed up, things like that. Or is this both, like a mix? In other words, are the players buying into this, and are all the players buying into this, or are there some guys like, nah, I'm just really naturally talented, forget all this data nonsense?
Yeah, that's a great question. You definitely have both people. I mean, people on both sides of the fence on that one. You have a player like Bryce Harper, who historically is not a big fan of the data, but he's just naturally gifted, amazing athlete, one of the best baseball players, no doubt. But you have a lot of fringe players who dream has been to be a professional baseball. They know they don't necessarily have the skill set with their current skills, and they're looking for an edge. So the book talks about that as well, like the Justin Turners. There's a handful of players, the JT Martinez, all these different players that honestly were probably on their way out, unfortunately, but they made these tweaks. They leveraged this technology to their advantage, and by like self-guided, self-driven, were able to drastically increase their performance by like the competitive advantages they gained through their insights and coaching. So to your point, both sides of the spectrum, definitely a lot of like fringe players that are, trying to figure out how they can save their careers, or I would say doubling down on it even more so. But across the board, even the Bryce Harpers of the world are using data more so than they've ever had in the past.
Zach, what were you going to ask?
I have so many questions going through my head right now. The first question I have is, do you know how many pitches like a guy like Bryce Harper would get in a season? Do you have any sense of how many pitches a batter will swing at?
It's a good question. They usually about 500 at bats is safe to say. Let's say 4 or 5 pitches per at bat. So anywhere between, I'd say 2,000 to 2,500 probably pitches that they
in a season.
Within a season.
Okay, so Bryce Harper's got 2,000 to 2,500 pitches in a season coming at him. These are all being recorded. What I'm understanding is they can now look at the rotation of the ball. They can see what kind of pitches he's hitting, which ones he's missing. That kind of data is being fed into, is it software? I mean, is it at that level that when he gets up to bat, the pitcher knows, like, this is the kind of pitch to throw. This is who we should put if we're playing the Phillies versus playing the Oakland A's. Is the data being used in that way as well, like for team management?
Oh yeah. So in-game strategy is a whole like pillar within baseball organizations. Now there's a lot of papers that have been written and published. So nothing I'm saying is necessarily confidential.
Yeah.
But if you look at like a catcher, for instance, oftentimes we'll even have like a wristband now that like quarterbacks have historically.
Yeah.
You can imagine what's on those wristbands is opposing batter
number, like just throw
hot zones, cold zones, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Avoid target. And even to go a step further, to blow your mind a little bit further, is not even on batters, but on umpires. So there's all this research that is publicly available that people put papers on as well, tracking like strike zone of umpires. So if you're a pitcher and you're having an O2 account, and you know that a umpire tends to call low outside, which is typically a ball, a strike, like there's a good chance you might be attacking that part of the zone just because you know that a umpire has that preference. So it's interesting that way.
I'm excited for when. Go ahead, Zach. I was just going to make a joke. but
I gave you a flat tire.
that's okay.
So let's say all that data, it's going into some kind of algorithm. When you're watching a baseball game, you see the coach come out and he's like, you're out of here. Even in Moneyball, when Billy Bean, he's telling the coach, like, we're not playing him, or we're putting this person, and he's just revolting. He's like, well, I quit. It seems like that level of staff is just not even really needed anymore.
Well,
Like, the computers can, to a large extent, kind of drive how the game is to be played every matchup.
that's a big controversy, right, Tanner? Like, how much the decision making is the manager of the game, and how much is it the front office saying, hey, pitch count at 96, this guy's out of here. No matter how good if he's hot, we don't care. It's 96, he's out.
Yeah, you have a whole spectrum of teams. If you look at teams that are leveraging data in totally different and weighted ways. So some teams are, to your point, Matt, pretty old school, where they probably aren't leveraging really data at all, and they rather rely on like instinct and kind of feel of the game. You have other organizations, I would say more so even like the Astros or some of these organizations that weigh pretty heavily on data. And then you have a whole spectrum of teams in the middle. So, yeah, it's interesting that way.
So we've gone from where steroids were the edge to now it's just data.
Exactly.
Like data on steroids.
Yeah. And it's always trying to find a competitive advantage. Baseball is an interesting sport where there's no like hard cap for salaries. So you have teams like the A's, who team might cost $80 million in salaries, versus the Phillies that are 240, 250. So you have this huge spectrum of what teams are putting to the table as far as spending on players. But the idea is, with this data, people are always trying to find competitive advantages. Like the Orioles are a good example of people who have had really great success in their organization with a really small budget. And then, data's the way you can gain advantage. The Tampa Bay Rays are probably the most notorious team for doing so. They've had, I'd say, the most consistent success over the last 10 years, largely because of like the standards they put in of how they leverage data for their advantage. So I would say they're probably the best in baseball. There's some teams that are probably the worst as well. But yeah.
I'm excited for the robot league when it's just robots playing baseball. That will be a lot of fun, and maybe the robots could take steroids and make it even better. I don't know. That would be pretty cool.
Hey, robot umpires, man, those are probably coming, but a lot of baseball enthusiasts are going to be sad for that one.
I will say, so this is a baseball themed podcast, but I'll be honest with you, that was more of an acquiescence to Zach's love of baseball. I'm a football guy, a boxing guy, predominantly, but I do obviously watch some baseball. And I will say, since they put the visual of the strike zone, I think the umpires are pretty good. I mean, again, This is me, just random fan watching, games here and there, but I've been pretty impressed with how they call the games, at least compared to what's on TV and what they're showing on TV. And so, anyway, for what it's worth,
it's impressive. A new big thing is now that these teams have like AI pitching, live pitching capabilities, where like batters can take live at bats. Again, that's public information. But when you're sitting there watching these AI machines throw those pitches, you just scratch your head and wonder how the umpires are so consistent. To your point,
they're pretty good.
When a ball's coming 98 miles an hour, or like the amount of break or horizontal, vertical movement some of these pitches have, you're just like, I don't know how the heck they do it. But to your point, like pretty skilled with the accuracy they do have.
So I think there's a lot of people who probably listen to this podcast who don't play baseball. And I played baseball growing up for like 1 year. And I'll tell you, the reason I quit is they put me at catcher for 1 inning. And I think there was the mercy rule was put in place because I was so bad at being catcher. And I never played catcher again. And it was a terrible experience. So I've experienced little league, baseball. But I did have a buddy who was drafted out of college, before college, to some, like a minor league. He's a minor league. Basically, he could have been a minor league pitcher. And he was out throwing the ball one day with a buddy and he brought a catcher's mitt or whatever. And he's like, Matt, just stand in and pretend like you have a bat and I'm going to throw you a pitch. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he's, warming up. I stand in there and he throws this curveball that looks like it's just going to completely blow my face away. And it luckily did missed and went in right in strike. I was like, oh man, this is pretty sketchy standing in the box here. Tanner, you played high school baseball. What was it like for you seeing some of those guys? How crazy were some of those pitchers?
In high school or the pitchers in
Well,
pro?
yeah, in high school. In high school, you've seen them, you faced them in real life, right? At
Yeah.
least high school pitchers. What's it like
Yeah.
there?
I would say high school pitchers are throwing low mid 80s,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty fast. Like if
It
you think about it.
is. Yeah.
They have pretty good, breaking balls, maybe a pretty good slider. So I would say for the most part, like a varsity baseball team has one or two pitchers that that is hard to hit, right?
Yeah.
And then when you watch pros, like the difference between those guys and these high school pitchers is just like you can't even compare.
Oh yeah.
It's like a whole different whole different game. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a total game of accountability too. I mean, to get up into the majors, you really have to sacrifice and work for it with no hope for ever getting a contract, right? You could just be poor for 5 years and then give up. I mean, the guys that make it, they work at it.
And to your point, the crazy thing about baseball is you don't get paid until you have 6 years of major league service time.
Mm-hmm.
So you might get drafted in the first round. You might get a pretty good payout for a signing bonus. But the majority of these guys grinding through the minor leagues, you're still on your rookie contract until you have 6 years of major league service time. Then you can finally get your first contract, become a free agent, and get a pretty big payday. Those guys do really well. In baseball, it's typically all guaranteed money. So if you make it that far, good for you. But they say it's probably the hardest sport to become a professional in, because to your point, Zach, like the grind of the minor leagues, getting there, you're competing with all these international players at this point. It's pretty intense. So it's kudos to everybody who does it and successful. And then to your point, like does it for 6 years of service time and gets big payday, because the probability of that happening is pretty slim. You got to be pretty consistent and driven to do so.
So what, a lot of times, let me ask you this. Is there anything else that you want to mention about the book before I ask you about like non-baseball stuff that relates to the book? Is there anything else that was, stood out to you from a baseball standpoint? Anything you maybe wish was there that wasn't there? Anything missing in this book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I think this book was a little bit premature for a lot of the biomechanics data that
Interesting.
teams are now diving into. The data quality is still pretty muddy in that area, so it's pretty fresh. But I do think there'll be a version 2 eventually as teams start understanding how to leverage this new data repository and get insights out of. So I think just more for like curiosity's sake, I'm curious, evolution of baseball, where does it continue to trend to?
Mm-hmm.
And as an old school baseball fan too, like I'm more of an old school, I think, in a lot of ways in my heart. So I'm curious how how that continues to evolve with the game as well, to make sure that there's still like that touch and that personality that the game has as well. So I would say not necessarily complaining about what's missing in the book, more so like
it's just premature. Yeah.
So yeah,
Zach, go for
it. Is this book, this data collection and analysis, I would imagine that these same principles can be applied to any other sport, basketball, hockey, or is it because baseball's so mechanical in the way that the pitch has to be delivered, the hit has to happen, the fielding? I'm just wondering, is this something that you'll see bleeding over into other sports outside of baseball, like football is a great example.
So you're seeing it bleed more so. I think football, especially basketball, has really jumped on the bandwagon. They have analytic teams now that they have internally, not to the scale of baseball. To your point, baseball is pretty mechanic. They've been doing this for a while. So it's more cut and dry. And I think baseball too, the one thing that makes baseball so special is there's like you don't have to be necessarily be physically gifted in the same way you have to be a basketball player, to be a football player. So there's that edge as well, which makes baseball, I think, so special. It's more of a game of grit and determination and acquiring skills, to your point of like those mechanics. So
my brother-in-law, he's a huge sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead.
He's a huge soccer guy. And I said, baseball is the great equalizer. Like every race, every nationality, everyone can play it.
Wade
and you see all
Boggs
types.
Yeah, Wade Boggs.
That's right.
Altuve, the little guy.
Yeah.
Right? So
It's great.
all sorts of body shapes. Yeah, different backgrounds, everything. It's amazing.
What the question is, we always try to apply this to our lives. And Zach asked a good question about it bleeding over to different sports. What about applying it to your life? Like, is there something that you learned that you could kind of internalize or make your life better?
Yeah. I think there's a few meta points just in baseball in general, and then I'll go into the book. But baseball, it's important to understand it's a game of losing. It's also called that. As a team, if you win half your games as a baseball team, that's actually a pretty successful season, which is a really weird concept, right? If you get out base, 1 out of 3 chances, especially major leagues, like you're going to be a very successful baseball player. So the odds are against you to succeed more than you lose, more times than not. But I think that's a beautiful thing about the game. And I think it's an important lesson in life as well. Like you go for things regardless of the outcomes. You might win, you might lose some, and that's fine. I think it's the learning experience and just the excitement of trying that's so valuable. So I think that's like a meta point in baseball in general that makes baseball, in my mind, so beautiful. And as well as just like the acquiring of skills takes a lot of diligence and time and persistence, right? So in order to be able to have the timing to hit a pitch coming in 95 miles an hour, like the amount of times you have to do that over and over again is just crazy. When you're at spring training, you'll see like them bring a pitching machine up to a catcher, and they're literally pitching balls right into the dirt to let the catcher have to scoop them over and over again for 30 minutes, an hour. So it's just like the repetition of doing the skills over and over and over again, which teaches your body, your mind, and gives you the muscle memory in order to be able to handle those situations. So I think baseball in general is a great, to your point, Matt, teacher of these type of things, of the persistence, consistency, even in the odds of losing, is very valuable. I think from the book standpoint, I'm a firm believer that people have amazing potential in life. I think our lives are so precious. They're beautiful. It's such a gift. And to think that anybody can be made into an MVP machine, to me, is quite motivating, and it's an optimistic way that I think we should evaluate ourselves, right? At the same time, we have to have the right data. We have to have the open mind and willingness to be uncomfortable and to adapt to those different data signals that we're getting in order to understand what the signals are versus the noise. And we have to, again, have the persistence to go for it. So I think the book does a good job kind of highlighting that point. And just, giving you some encouragement and motivation that, whatever it is you want to do in life, like it is, the realm of it is possible, right? With the right persistence and the right data, you can do it. So.
Yeah, that's really, really well put. And if I was a good podcaster, I would remember exactly what episode Zach was talking about. The book that talks about people that are really talented almost have a disadvantage because people just tell them they're great all the time. Do you remember that podcast, Zach, or what book that was by chance?
Yeah, it was The Intelligence Trap, and it talks about Billy Beane wanting to be a professional ball player, didn't make it, but he came back. That's what you were reminding of before we got started. You were talking about being a professional ball player, and you came at it from another angle, just like Billy Beane. And so you just have to have that mental flexibility.
Yeah. And I love that you said you just got to be open to the data and making changes and working at getting better. So that was well put, Tanner. Anything else about the book you want to say?
Nothing more so about the book. I think we've
Okay.
done a good job of
Now,
going through it.
the real question is, what you're a baseball guy. We rate everything with a baseball. I don't even know what you call it. Baseball rating.
Okay.
What would you rate this book?
Rate the book.
Yeah.
Okay, I would rate the book. I would give it like, if you're a baseball fan, I would say it's probably B+ material. If you're not a baseball fan, I would say lower it to probably B- area.
Okay, so you can't give us a grade. You got to give us like is it a double?
Oh,
Is it a
sorry, I thought I
C?
was grading
No,
it.
that's okay. No, yeah. You're giving a rating based on like, is it a base? Is it, a
Oh,
beanball? Is it a fly out? Is it a
well,
little an error?
yeah, you're good. If you're a baseball fan, stand up triple.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah. If you're not a baseball fan, let's say you overthrow to first base, base
Here we
hit,
go.
you end up on second.
Got it. Okay, got it. I love it. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, this
Two
is
scores.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's what we like, because I agree, because like I like baseball and it somewhat interests me, but I'm like, is this my thing? Like where, and I know it, I get it, because I read a lot of boxing books, and I understand that, like, yeah, if you don't like boxing, you might not like this, but sometimes the stories in there, are universal and can apply to everybody. And so I love the two ratings. We really appreciate having you on the podcast. Anything else you want to plug? Social media, anything fun you're doing?
No, I'm a pretty unexciting guy, so I definitely appreciate you guys having me on.
I do. Yeah, I do have a question for you though, since you live in Austin.
Yeah, go for it.
You don't know this, but I'm a huge live music fan, and
Okay.
like South by Southwest, Austin is very well known for live music. Do you go out and partake of that, or are you busy home changing diapers? What's the deal? Are you a live music guy? Do you get out there?
We have not been as much as we probably should.
Okay.
I will say though, I have a friend that I grew up with in St. Louis that is in a pretty popular band here in Austin. They're getting
Oh, cool.
popular.
What's the name of the band?
Dayglow.
Dayglow. All right, I'm gonna write this
Yeah,
down.
so you look them up. They're pretty popular.
Okay.
They performed not too long ago here in Austin, and we did go and support that concert, which was
Very good.
good times. It was fun.
What kind of band? Just rock band? What kind of music?
It's more like what's the right way to say it? It's like it's like it's alternative, not alternative rock. Man, my friend would be so mad at me right now if he watched this.
Well, don't let. He's not going to listen to this. Don't recommend this podcast to him.
I actually played baseball through growing up, so I don't know.
That's okay. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I don't want to. We'll say this. I don't want to ruin it, so you guys have to go.
Okay, we'll go check it out. I will next week. I will give my review of Dayglow.
Yeah.
But yeah, South by Southwest is one of those places where I've always wanted to go. There's a really cool band out of England that kind of paid their own way. A band called Ist Ist. They're a post-punk band out of England, and they basically they're independent, and they just paid their own money to come play at South by Southwest. And
that's amazing. They're
very cool guys. I actually ended up asking them kind of questions about it, because I have some friends that I'd love to have come over from the UK and play South by Southwest. But it's not cheap. The music industry is pretty rough right now. Not a great thing going on, as far as, it's not like the old days. We're just handing out contracts left and right. So
yeah.
Anyway. But very cool. Well, Austin, at least you have some awesome barbecue down in Austin. So
the barbecue is unexplainable.
Tell me you've been to Franklin's at least.
Been to Franklin's.
Okay. That's what I want to hear, Tanner. Even if that was a lie, I wanted to hear it, because Franklin's is unbelievable. Yeah. Franklin's is amazing, huh?
Yeah. Franklin's, it's hard to, you got to experience it.
Oh yeah. I just a quick story. We were in Austin kind of during the COVID times, and we were actually kind of lucky, because anybody that knows Franklin's, you have to line up like at 5:30, 6 in the morning to go there. But during COVID, you could order online, and then they would go put it in your trunk while you waited. And so we happened to be able to go there and not have to wait in line for 6 hours and hope we could get food. So, all right, we'll talk barbecue off air, Tanner. When next time I'm down there, you can take me to some place that's good.
Yeah, barbecue on me, Matt, and you, Zach. So
all right,
just remember that. Remind me of it when you're here.
Okay,
deal.
Hey, thanks, Tanner. Really appreciate having you on. Everybody, thanks again for for listening to the podcast. Like, subscribe. I should also say a special thank you to Deja Vega for our music. I keep forgetting to say that. They're one of my favorite bands out there. Check out Deja Vega since we were talking music. Everybody have a good night, and check us out next time on the Pitch Book Podcast.